The stench hit us first, not the ordinary, fleeting odor of something dead in the forest, but a heavy, cloying sweetness that hooked into the back of my throat and refused to let go. 3 days into our backcountry photography expedition, we were tired, sore, and eager to reach the lake marked on our maps. But that smell pulled us off course, dragged us toward it, like some unseen hand was guiding our steps. Jake spotted the structure first, a hunting cabin, or what was left of one, tucked into a clearing strangled by Douglas firs. Weathered logs slouched into each other, the roof caving under years of winter snow. The windows gaped hollow, sockets stripped of glass. Jesus, what died in there? Sarah muttered, pulling her bandana over her nose. I should have listened to her hesitation. I should have respected that instinct. But curiosity had always been my vice. And as a wildlife photographer, I'd walked into scenes of death before deer carcasses, bear caches, even a cougar kill once. I told myself this was no different. But I knew, even before I reached the cabin, that it was. The closer we came, the more details pressed themselves into my vision, details I couldn't reconcile. Deep gouges etched the logs in erratic patterns, scratches, at first glance, but wrong somehow. Too high to be bare marks. Too wide to match even a grizzly. They started 8 feet off the ground and climbed higher, like something enormous had either clawed its way in or out. Jake ran his fingers over the scars in the wood. Bear? He said half-heartedly, as if testing the word. I spread my hand wide against the grooves. My palm disappeared inside one mark, dwarfed. No bear's claws are this far apart, I whispered. Look how deep they sink. That's not curiosity. That's desperation. The front door hung by a single hinge, rusted metal twisted like tinfoil. We stepped closer, and the stench thickened until it became almost physical, a syrupy heat that filled our lungs. Sarah stayed near the tree line. I heard the tremor in her voice when she said, "Don't go inside, please." But Jake and I had already crossed the threshold. The sight stopped us in place. Bones. Everywhere. A sprawl of bones so dense the floor was nearly hidden. Elk antlers jutted from corners like grotesque chandeliers. Deer skulls leaned against the walls, cracked spines and femurs tangled in piles that looked arranged, deliberate. But interlaced among them shoes, nylon straps, a weather-faded backpack, a phone with its screen spider-webbed, but still catching the light of my flashlight, and a keychain, metallic and familiar, its little Seahawks emblem swinging gently, as if moved by a breath we couldn't feel. Sarah's voice cut through the silence from the doorway. This? T. His is a crime scene. We have to call someone. My light panned across the interior, catching more gouges inside the cabin-long claw marks, dragging upward, ceiling to floor, as though something had hung suspended, thrashing. Then I saw words carved into the wall above a rusting stove. Letters gouged deep with what must have been a blade, the words uneven, frantic. It comes at night, bigger than bear, runs on 2 legs. God help us. Below it, a date, just 3 weeks old. I remember the way the hair rose on my arms. Every cell of my body screamed to get out. But then Jake's hand clamped onto my arm. Wait, look. In the far corner, resting on a crude wooden shelf, sat a camera, a professional model, too expensive to abandon casually. Its screen glowed faintly, battery nearly gone. Jake lifted it carefully, his hands trembling. "Memory card's gone," he whispered, "but it's still got some internal storage." He scrolled through the photos, his face hardening with each one. First normal shots. 4 hikers, young, smiling, posing outside this same cabin, tents pitched neatly in the clearing. Then chaos. Night images, blurry, frantic. A figure half caught in a flash, impossibly tall, eyes glowing far above the ground. Branches bending under weight. And then the last photo, a massive hand pressed flat against the cabin's broken window. Human-like, but grotesque in proportion. Fingers too long, too knuckled, filling the frame as if whoever or whatever stood outside had leaned close to peer inside. Sarah's voice cracked into panic. "We're leaving, now." No one argued this time. We barely made it 50 yards before the sound began. A rumble at first, like a distant engine buried in the soil. But there were no roads here, no machines. The vibration deepened, rolling underfoot until I felt it in my chest. Then came the snapping branches breaking in a line that shadowed our path. Heavy, deliberate steps, each one spaced wider than any human stride. "Don't run," I whispered, my own voice shaking. "Back away slow, just slow." But the forest had other plans. The stench hit us again, stronger now, rot laced with wet fur, musk, something alive. A fir tree 20 feet away shuddered violently, shaking free a rain of needles. Its trunk was massive, 3 people wide, yet it swayed, as though something was rattling it from its base. That's when I saw it. Between the trees, a silhouette that didn't belong. Upright, impossibly tall, shoulders like boulders stacked on one another, arms dangling low, fingers curling at their ends. Its face caught the last light slanting through the canopy, features distorted, stretched, human but not human, eyes that gleamed with a sharp intelligence. It tilted its head, and then came the sound. Not a growl, not a word. A vibration that lived somewhere between the two, spilling out of its chest like the groan of shifting earth. "Camera," I whispered to Jake. "Get it. Get it now." He tried. His hands shook so badly, the first flash caught nothing but blur. The second missed entirely. But the third blurred, though it was captured enough. A massive arm stretched as though reaching for us. Eyes catching the flash, reflecting not like an animal's, but like something aware. That was all it took. Whatever instinct had kept us frozen shattered. We ran. Branches slashed our faces, roots grabbed at our boots, but we didn't stop. Behind us, the forest split with sound wood breaking, earth shuddering, something enormous in pursuit. Then silence, sudden and suffocating, more terrifying than the noise. We didn't breathe again until the truck was in sight, waiting where we'd left it at the old logging road. The sun slid behind the ridge as I fumbled with the keys, the lock refusing, my hands slipping. When the engine finally roared, it felt less like escape and more like borrowed time. We drove without speaking. Not a word, not even a glance, until we reached the highway and civilization's fragile lights came into view. Only then did Jake open his camera again, scrolling through the photos, his voice flat. "They're not clear. No one's going to believe." And I knew he was right. Proof wasn't what we'd brought back with us. Just questions, just nightmares. Just something waiting out there in the timber. Something that had seen us, studied us, and let us go. Because it wanted us to. Because we weren't witnesses. We were bait. For days after that night, I couldn't bring myself to look at the photos again. They sat on Jake's camera, backed up to my hard drive, but I avoided them like they carried a disease. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw more than the images could ever capture. The height of that figure, the weight of its gaze, the way it tilted its head as though studying us. Sarah refused to speak about it at all. When I tried, her silence was sharp, almost violent, like she thought if she ignored the memory long enough, it might die on its own. But some things don't die. They follow you. A week later, the authorities released their statement about the cabin. Human remains confirmed, mixed with animals. Bear activity, they said. Aggressive feeding behavior. Case closed. But I couldn't stop thinking about the message carved into that wall. It comes at night, bigger than bear, runs on 2 legs. That carving was fresh. Someone wrote it just weeks before we arrived. Someone who may have never walked back out. The rational part of me wanted to believe the official story. Bears do scavenge. Bears do break into cabins. Bears do kill people when desperate. But no bear I'd ever seen walked upright through trees or pressed a hand against glass with fingers too long for any human skeleton. Jake, though, was different. He grew obsessed. He'd quit freelance photography, but his nights were spent trawling forums, cryptid sightings, lost hikers, wilderness mysteries. He built timelines, collected reports. At first, I thought it was just his way of coping. Then he called me one night, his voice shaking, the words tumbling too fast. "There's another cabin," he said, "Olympic Peninsula. Same signs, scratches on the walls, bones everywhere. Hiker found it 2 days ago. The bottom dropped out of my stomach." "I'm not going back," I told him flatly. "I'm not asking you to," he said, but I could hear the lie in his voice, because part of me already knew he would go with or without me. For weeks I tried to live normally, coffee shops, editing old photo sets, pretending the world outside my window wasn't bigger, darker, stranger than I wanted to admit. But nights betrayed me. Nights carried the echo of that rumbling growl, the memory of a tree shaking against impossible weight. I'd wake drenched in sweat, half expecting to see a silhouette framed against the window glass. And then one evening, while scrolling through the photos again against my better judgment, I noticed something I'd missed. In the final blurry image where the massive hand reached from the shadows, there was more. Just past the edge of the frame, barely visible, was a reflection. Not from the flash, not from our lights. A faint glimmer of metal, like something strapped across its chest. That realization froze me, because it meant one of 2 things. Either my mind was playing tricks with pixels, or this wasn't just an animal. Jake called again 2 nights later. His voice was ragged. "They're moving closer. Reports aren't just in the Cascades anymore. Sightings in Northern California, Oregon, some in Montana." He paused. "Something's happening. They're not just staying hidden anymore." I wanted to hang up, but I couldn't, because part of me had noticed it too. Stories in local papers missing hikers, unexplained bones, families vanishing on routine backpacking trips. Most of it buried in the back pages, brushed off as accidents, exposure, wild animals. But the pattern was there if you looked closely. Sarah wouldn't answer our calls anymore. She'd blocked us both. I couldn't blame her. Some people can wall off terror. Others, like Jake and me, find the walls cracking every time the wind shifts. The night that pushed me over the edge came in October. I was walking home late, city streets empty, rain misting under the street lights. That same smell hit me faint, diluted but unmistakable. Rot tangled with wet fur, a sweetness that crawled into the sinuses. My body froze on instinct, heart stuttering. I spun in every direction, but the sidewalks were empty, alleys still. Only the hiss of rain. But I knew that smell doesn't belong in cities, doesn't belong anywhere near concrete. And for the first time, I realized maybe it wasn't about wilderness anymore. I called Jake the next morning. "I'm in," I told him. "But if we do this, we don't go unprepared." We planned quietly, like conspirators. Maps, coordinates, trail reports. We bought night vision, motion trigger cameras, backup batteries. Gear heavy enough to slow us down, but necessary if we wanted to prove what we'd seen. Proof. That word felt dangerous on my tongue. Proof could break us. Proof could kill us. But still we packed. When I think back to the day we left for Washington, what I remember most is Sarah's silence. One final text from her: "If you go back, you won't come out again." I stared at the words, but didn't reply. Some truths can't be shared. They have to be carried, shouldered in silence. By the time we reached the Olympic Peninsula, fog had already swallowed the treetops. Old-growth forest stretched in every direction, timber so thick the sun barely broke through, moss draped heavy, as if the land itself wanted to hide what it contained. The trail was more rumor than path, and soon enough, even that vanished. We walked deeper, silence pressing close. Even the birds seemed absent. No chatter, no calls, no wing beats. Just stillness. The deeper we went, the more I felt it, that sensation of being studied. Not stalked, not hunted. Watched, as though the forest itself had grown eyes. By the time we reached the second cabin, daylight was gone. The clearing opened suddenly, like a wound in the trees, and there it stood. Logs sagging, roof broken, door yawning wide. And before we even stepped inside, the smell hit us. Thick, sweet, wrong. Jake raised his camera. My flashlight beam shook across the doorframe, catching the first of the gouge's claw marks that rose higher than even the last cabin. Some starting at the floor, others carved downward from impossible heights. "God," Jake whispered. We hadn't even entered yet. Inside that second cabin, the air felt wrong. Not just the rot, though the rot was unbearable. Thick enough to sting the eyes, but the weight of it. As if the room itself had absorbed too many final breaths. My flashlight beam cut through dust and shadow, and the first thing it landed on was a heap of bones stacked neatly in one corner. Not scattered, not chaotic like the first cabin. Arranged, rib cages nested together like grotesque baskets, spines laid side by side in unnerving precision. Why would a bear do this? Jake muttered, though his voice already carried the answer. No bear would. Near the collapsed stove, another message was carved into the wood, the letters uneven and jagged. They know we're watching. They're watching back. Below it, the date, just 2 days before. The floor groaned under our boots. My flashlight beam landed on something that turned my stomach cold. A jacket, torn but still recognizable bright red nylon with a sewn patch on the sleeve. I'd seen the same jacket in one of the photos on Jake's recovered camera. One of the 4 hikers grinning in front of the first cabin. I crouched and picked it up with shaking hands. The fabric was stiff, crusted, dark. "They didn't leave," I whispered. "They never left." Jake snapped pictures, his hands trembling but steady enough to work the shutter. The camera clicked again and again, the sound almost obscene in the silence. Then we heard it, a shuffle, not outside but above. We froze, both of us staring upward at the sagging beams. Dust trickled from between the boards. Something was up there, something heavy, shifting its weight. I killed my light instantly, and the room collapsed into darkness so complete it felt alive. Jake fumbled, but I clamped my hand over his wrist before he could lift his camera again. The silence pressed in, broken only by slow, deliberate movement overhead. Each creak of the boards mapped a weight that was far too heavy to belong to a raccoon or even a black bear. The sound stopped directly above us. I don't know how long we stood there, lungs burning, trying not to breathe. A minute, maybe two, then scraping. Nails, claws, something dragging across the planks, tracing the space where we stood as if it could sense us. And then, with a sudden crack, a board split. Dust and splinters rained down. A long, pale hand forced through the gap, fingers splaying, reaching blindly. Human in shape, but stretched wrong. The joints bent too sharp, the fingers too long, nails blackened and cracked. Jake almost screamed, but I shoved him toward the door. We bolted into the clearing, lungs heaving, the forest swallowing us in shadow. The air outside felt no safer. It was too quiet again, that unnatural absence. No wind, no insects, no life at all. Just us standing in a clearing that felt like a stage. Then the smell returned. Stronger than before, closer. Jake raised his camera automatically, though his hand shook so violently the lens rattled. "Do you smell that?" He whispered. I did. It wasn't just rot anymore. It was heat, musk, the smell of something alive and breathing, hidden just beyond the tree line. The fog thickened, curling between the trunks, and in that pale haze a silhouette shifted, towering, still, watching. We didn't run, not yet. Terror held us rooted, staring at that outline that seemed carved from the mist itself. I remember the way my chest pounded, the way my brain screamed at me to flee, but my body refused to obey. The figure tilted its head, just as it had in the Cascades. That same slow, calculated gesture, as though comparing us to something it already understood. And then, without sound, it stepped back into the trees and was gone. Jake gasped, his camera clicking in bursts, though the fog had already swallowed everything. "We're leaving," I hissed, grabbing his sleeve. But as we turned, movement caught my eye again. A second silhouette on the opposite side of the clearing, and then a third, farther back among the trunks. Each massive, each upright. We weren't dealing with one. The clearing closed around us like a tightening net. Shadows shifted in pairs and trios, flanking us without a sound. "They're circling," Jake whispered. My throat went dry. This wasn't chance. This wasn't us stumbling into something rare. This was coordinated, deliberate. We ran. Not back toward the trail, not toward safety, but deeper into the forest. Panic chose our direction. Branches whipped our faces, roots clawed our boots, but still we ran. Behind us came no roar, no crashing pursuit, only silence, which somehow made it worse. When we finally collapsed near a moss-covered boulder, gasping, we realized the silence wasn't total after all. Faint at first, almost beneath hearing, a sound wove itself through the trees. A low hum, metallic, pulsing like some buried machine coming to life. It vibrated in my bones, steady, unrelenting. And as it grew louder, Jake and I realized with the same sick certainty, it wasn't coming from behind us. It was coming from ahead. The hum thickened as we stumbled forward, no longer faint, but pressing into the marrow of our bones. It wasn't a sound you simply heard, it was a presence, a vibration threading through flesh and earth alike. Each step forward made it stronger, and soon I could feel it in my teeth, rattling like a drill against enamel. We crested a small ridge and froze. Below us, in a hollow where the fog swirled unnaturally, stood a structure. Not a cabin, not ruins, something older, something that should not have existed here. A ring of massive stones, blackened and slick, jutting upward like broken teeth. Between them, wooden frames lashed together with rawhide. Symbols carved deep into their surfaces, some crude, some impossibly intricate, glowing faintly with that same pulsing rhythm as the hum. Jake lifted his camera, whispering, "Jesus Christ?" His voice cracked. The forest had gone utterly still again, but not empty this time. Watching, waiting. I could feel eyes, dozens of them, just beyond the veil of fog. Shapes shifted between the trees, hulking, silent, patient. We descended slowly, drawn against every instinct. The smell here was unbearable rot, mixed with something metallic, like blood left too long in the sun. At the center of the ring lay remnants, bones, dozens of them, some human, some not. Arranged in spirals, rib cages interlocked, skulls tilted upward as though staring toward the treetops. Jake crouched to photograph them, his hands trembling so badly the camera strap rattled against his chest. The flash went off far too bright against the fog, and that was the mistake. From the tree line, a figure stepped forward, then another, then three more. They didn't crash through the brush. They didn't make a sound. They emerged as though the forest itself had exhaled them. Towering, broad-shouldered, their silhouettes shifting subtly with each pulse of the hum, as though reality bent around them. Jake raised the camera again, desperate, but I shoved his arm down. "Stop," I hissed, though my voice was barely a breath. The tallest figure tilted its head again, that same calculating gesture. Slowly, it raised one long arm and pointed. Not at us, at the stones. The hum grew louder. The cymbals pulsed brighter. And then, impossibly, the ground beneath us shifted. The spiral of bones trembled, rattling together in a grotesque harmony. The fog thickened, rising in columns as though pulled upward by invisible strings. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. Jake clutched my shoulder, gasping, his eyes wide. Something was happening here, something ritualistic, deliberate. And we weren't witnesses. We were participants. The tallest figure lowered its arm. The others fanned out, surrounding the circle, their massive shapes blotting out what little light seeped through the canopy. The hum crescendoed. The bones shuddered violently, and in the gaps between the stones, I swear I saw movement, something vast and writhing just beneath the surface of the earth. Jake whispered, "We need to go." But my legs wouldn't move. The air pressed too heavy, the vibration locking me in place. My thoughts scattered, replaced by one singular, primal certainty. Whatever lived here, whatever was being called it, had noticed us. and it wasn't going to let us leave.